at least what we can do is give them a really big hand and say welcome and come and share their story. So Ian, come and sit here. Thank you. Actually, this interview is going to be a little bit special because both Ian and I, we speak Danish, so we're going to do it in Danish. Så god aften, Ian, og tak fordi du kom.
Jamen, det er en fornøjelse, så...
Ja, så skal vi snakke lidt forretning.
Lad os gøre det.
Iværksætter, no. Let's switch to English, okay? But that is actually a funny story. I think we should start actually with your background and where are you from, your education, where did you grew up, etc.
So, I'm Ian. I'm Scottish-Danish. I lived in 6 countries. I studied international business and languages in Edinburgh, Strasbourg, and I did an executive MBA here in Madrid. I worked for IBM in Germany as my first job, and then I was at the headquarters of Novo Nordisk, a top 10 pharma. And then I worked for Genzyme, a biotech, at their European headquarters in Amsterdam. But the short story is that career progression is all about moving further south. So that's why I came to Spain, and that's why I've lived in Madrid for the last 8 or 9 years. And you know, the story was that along the way, when I was doing an executive MBA at IE, we had an internal project in entrepreneurship, which we had to choose a business idea. And since I just lived in Amsterdam previous to that, I had seen more car sharing cars than taxis in that particular city, so I was impressed by the idea. And Respiro was our project, and somehow we won a small internal competition, and then we were entered in something that's called the Venture Lab, and we made it to the final, and there were journalists and investors who liked it. And about a year later, Respiro started as the first car-sharing company in Madrid in 2010.
I still want to go a little bit back because you took it in a leapfrog. So you grew up in Scotland.
Yes.
Yes. Your parents are you know, whether you're in an entrepreneurial environment.
Yes, my father was an entrepreneur. He started to, well, it's like, you know, the joke about entrepreneurs, you know, why did you become an entrepreneur? It was something, the last thing my boss said to me, which was, what, you're fired. My father got fired. And he was actually a director of Britain's biggest tour operating company. So he started his own. And that then became Scotland's biggest tour operator. And it took him, I think, 25 years. And he started off on his own with my mom, and it was in the second lounge at home. And I actually grew up thinking that I would never become an entrepreneur because my father worked all the time. And I thought it must be much easier to work on multinationals, so to earn a living. But he became very successful, and he retired when he was 50. And I realized that I had actually learned a lot about business when I was just listening to my father.
So those dinner table conversations was about market penetration and product and marketing and sales and
those kind of buzzwords were, you know, I didn't even realize they were buzzwords. He used them, so we listened. And he would encourage us. You know, if we were driving through the city, you drive past a business, and he would ask us, you know, what kind of business model would that be? So 8 years old, we were talking about value chains and positionings and value propositions. So I had an interest for business quite young.
That's very, very interesting and awesome. So I think this question is, you're the perfect one to answer that. Is entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs, is it DNA or is it taught?
Well, that's a good question. I think in my case it's DNA, because the apple never falls far from the tree. So I realized at a certain stage when I got promoted a few times in the companies I was at, and I ended up leading a reasonably sized business, and I think I was disproportionately annoyed by bad attitude.
Okay.
And I think I had an entrepreneurial mindset. I was looking at the company that I was managing as if it were my own. So at a certain stage, when we had done lots of projects, you might be frustrated in multinationals by the slow speed of decision making. Entrepreneurship, I think, more subliminally than anything started appearing attractive.
Okay.
Although not by design, I definitely did not set out to become an entrepreneur at any stage. It was an accident.
So now that you saw your father, you did not want to be an entrepreneur. You actually never wanted to be an entrepreneur. And now that you are an entrepreneur, are there things that you wish you knew then or before you started?
Oh, of course, because you make a lot of mistakes. Make mistakes every day, but try to learn from them, right? So, I think it helps to have an insight to what it is, because you're more prepared for it. Because entrepreneurship is a lot more than a 9-to-5 job. It's consuming, and so I had no false expectations to that regard when we started. And some of my co-founders, because they did not have the previous insight into entrepreneurship, they maybe were a bit more shocked than I was. So, because every time there's an opportunity or a problem, you will get the result based on your input. So there's nobody else. I mean, the great thing, and maybe the bad thing about entrepreneurship, is that you're totally on your own. So it's total freedom, but it's also, it can be difficult.
Cool. You mentioned that you have lived in 6 different countries.
Yeah.
Do you think that sort of, having gone many different places and seen cultures and stuff, has that added anything to your to being an entrepreneur?
I think it helps me accept variety and diversity better. I'm not very tolerant, but I'm more tolerant than now if I had just
don't piss him off
in one particular area, because you realize that some things are universal, that everybody has needs and wants, and then some things can be a little bit different in certain cultures, right? And all the stereotypes, by the way, are true, of course. Germans are like Germans, and French like.
Something I noticed, you said your father came from the travel industry, and then he actually set up his own travel. And this is one of the key pillars in entrepreneurship. This is domain expertise.
Yeah.
That you know that industry you're going into.
Yeah.
I mean, besides driving a car, which I guess you do have a driving license, what other domain expertise did you have on car sharing?
None. Okay. Absolutely none. I had a driving license, but there's some of the co-founders that didn't even drive. So
that's a good word.
And I have never owned a car, so that at least I have the target profile.
You are taking your own medicine.
I had company cars, and I always thought I would never pay that amount of money for a car. It's very nice that they give me it, but if the package was different, I wouldn't be, driving an Audi. I just don't see the value. I think it's a myth, the beauty of the engine and whatever, for 45,000 euros. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. So to that degree, I had the perspective of.
So how important is then domain expertise, would you say? Because you just founded one of the biggest companies in Spain in car sharing, for sure, without any domain expertise.
Well, we were very conscious of that. So we finished our MBA in 2008, and we launched Respiro in 2010. And so 2 of the founders, myself and Klaus, a German. We were a French guy, a Scottish guy, a German, and 1 Spanish. And Spanish did most of the work.
That's unusual.
So the German and I, we were traveling a lot, and we went to see as many car sharing operators around the world, and we tried to learn from them. And
learn fast.
Yeah, and in particular, hear what their stories were, what they had done, what their successes were, where they had erred, and with that knowledge, when we launched Respiro, we definitely made less mistakes than we would have. And we saw some things that our competition did that we would never have done, thanks to the fact that we had been around. I mean, I personally was in Toronto, Montreal, Boston, New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, talking to car sharing operators, just because I was going there on business anyway. And in Europe, the list was longer. So they didn't all tell us many secrets, but you picked up something from every discussion. And it's actually a network which we still use today, because technology is a core success factor. You need to have an incredibly stable system that works every time, and there's a lot of potential to plug in ERPs and CRMs and big data and you name it. But it's hard to do if you're doing it on your own, and it's much better to do it in a partnership or a group or a coalition. So our technology development strategy has been to partner, and
I think
that helped us a lot.
I think you mentioned, just to follow on this line, we go back. I think you mentioned that you were having lots of your work done in Israel.
Yeah. We work with some very smart Israelis, and we're their only customers, which is because they don't normally commercialize. And one of the reason that we actually found them was because we had done this tour of the world, and we talked to different people. We said, you know what, I heard about this in-house project that the Pointer Group is huge, it's a stock exchange listed company. They have this, so maybe you could call them up and get into their project. And so we did, and we have below market rate prices and above market level technology. It's sophisticated because they have, they're thinking more long term, and we're a little bit their guinea pig, if you like. But the technology works very well.
Let's get back to entrepreneurship. What barriers do you see in Spain for becoming an entrepreneur? And do you see any benefits from these other countries that you have lived in? I mean, you have lived in so many countries. Is there something in the way you grew up in Danish, Scottish that you can see lowered that barrier? And what barriers do you see in Spain?
Well, I would say the thing you can see in Spain is actually opportunities, because this is a land of monopolies. So if you can break monopolies, and there's not that many startups or emerging SMEs as you might see in other countries, if you're doing a good job, then maybe you will not be in such a competitive area. In our case, we still ended up being 3 companies, maybe 4 if you count Cartoon. So I think it's possible to break into the market better in Spain. However, there are some barriers, of course. There's barriers in terms of, well, they say that the probability of a startup being successful is also to a degree related to whether there have been many startups in that city that have been successful previously. So it's like a knock-on effect, so that there's an ecosystem of people that have worked in entrepreneurship. So for example, there's how many more times investment does Barcelona get compared to Madrid? Well, because Barcelona has an ecosystem of entrepreneurs, right? So I'm not sure if that's outside or inside Spain anymore, but if you go to Northern Europe, there's much more prominent SMEs and startups, and people wanting to start up projects and not necessarily being scared of it. I think in Spain a barrier is that the social network or social security is less, and people are petrified of losing their jobs or taking risks. I think you don't have the same ability to fall back on a soft cushion if you're not successful first time. I was very surprised when the first time I came to Spain. I was sent to reorganize the affiliate of a biotech, and the employees were terrified of losing, and they're all PhDs and doctors. And so, and they've been 15 years in one company, and they only got promoted once or never. And like, maybe you could try something else. But the rotation is very low, and so there's less ease with trying perhaps new things or tradition. I think it's, these things take a long time, so it's contagious. You hear, it depends. So there's there are some barriers in Spain to entrepreneurship, but I think there's a lot of talent in every city and in Europe. I don't think there's less talent, probably more here. It's about finding the right people.
What would you tell a guy that is sitting in a job and is not happy, or one of these people here that is considering whether to leave a job? What would you tap them on the shoulder and tell them, what would be the motivation to start?
Well, I mean, people should be self-confident. It is impactful when somebody comes to you, sends a spontaneous application, when they do reach you and you read it, and if they're convinced themselves that they can do brilliant things and they promise brilliant things, well, I mean, that's already a good start. And I'm surprised that there's so few instances of that. If I look at the people that I know that have been more successful with their careers, many of them have just said, okay, I want a new job, so I'm just writing to the top 10 companies that are near the space that I'm in, and I'm writing to the CEO. And opportunities appear if you go out and ask for them, not just wait for vacancies there. I think being proactive helps, of course.
Proactivity, yeah. Because we're in Spain and the Spanish language is, predominantly a language in the world, do you think that Spain has a bit of a disadvantage in that the Spanish entrepreneurs maybe do not speak enough English, or?
Well, maybe if they have a global outreach from the start, I mean, there is a huge advantage to being fluent and comfortable in English, and if it's not your case, then maybe you're not going to start a global startup, but you need something global. I think if you're going to start a company, it helps to have been in lots of companies already, because then you have an idea of what the building blocks are, right?
Yeah.
So if it's an international startup and you've not been in an international environment, then it's quite hard. Yeah.
That's going to be difficult. Okay, let's go a little bit to the Respiro. You told a little bit in the beginning that it was, a project you had at school, but how was the idea born? I mean, how did you even get into that project when you started that idea at the IE?
It was because I had seen it in Amsterdam and was so impressed, and I always thought that cars were a little bit of a waste of money, and I didn't really appreciate it myself as a status symbol. So they say that today in 2016, the car has lost a lot of the status that I had in the past, and it's all about identity and social networks and iPhones and whatever. But I think I was already in that mindset, so I never looked at the car as being something that aspirational.
So let's just pick on that one. So from your perspective, where do you see the car industry, not the car sharing, but the car industry in 20 years from now on? I mean, the manufacturers, where should they?
I think half of them will disappear. I mean, between 3D printing, manufacturing techniques, the shared economy, electrification, and autonomous vehicles. This has been a sector that has evolved incrementally for 100 years. But the next 5 or 10, arguably, there will be much more change than there has been in the last 100. So it's going to be really interesting. Darwin says that it's not the most intelligent who survive, but the ones who adapt the best, who are most flexible. And if you look at the characteristics of most OEMs, they are bigger than most ministries, and so they're institutions, and institutions per se do not change very much. So I believe those who think that many of them will disappear because digital transformation is challenging the old business models.
And what if we should put on our crystal ball here and look in? What type of cars do you think we could drive in 20 years? Multi-purpose, I mean, with lots of people in them, or small individual ones? And what with the guy that wants a Porsche? I mean, what is he going to do?
I think there still will be those, kind of cars for the small percentage that want them. I guess there will be these kind of robo-taxis that drive people around sooner than we think. They already launched the first autonomous vehicle in Singapore, or even so it's actually live on the streets. It's kind of strange because 3 months ago I was in Germany and the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology said that it was life-threateningly dangerous to drive an autonomous car until probably about 2020 something. So there are different opinions here, and I don't know who to listen to. But
I mean, you have a million deaths a year worldwide from human-driven cars, and also now we had one accident with a Google car that caused death. So
well, it's probably German perfectionism. They're in the same.
So it's not the German cars that crashes and kills people.
No, but they say that the first automobile made by Benz was actually 4 years in his garage, working more or less very well, but he wouldn't take it out because it wasn't perfect. And then one day his wife's father was ill, and so the wife took it out of the garage and drove it 35 kilometers to take the doctor to her father. And then from that they realized in fact that the Benz automobile actually worked. So
okay,
so I think probably it's cultural.
So in we know in Respiro, the story of Respiro that you wrote the project and you got approached already, but very early on you took a CEO on, Ines.
Yeah.
How did that come about, and why were you not the CEO of running your own idea?
I was definitely not brave enough. I mean, I had a very well-paid job. I was in this biotech world. I was advancing my career. I thought it was a great project, but I wanted to invest and sort of do a bit of the planning. I did a little business planning. I can contribute with that. But Ines had founded a microchip brokerage company that went break even in 6 weeks, and they sold it after 2.5 years.
Talk about a turnaround.
So she's not quite making as much fast money with Respiro, but she was looking for a sustainable business, because the first business that she had been in was transitory. It was a window in the market that was going to close, and they sold the company because they knew in a year the window was closing. There was a supply-demand disparity with microchips. In the past, a microchip was sold 14 times before it went into your computers, and there were brokers making margins all the way there. And it's not quite like that today, but she was in the right place at the right time. And so she was the person to lead it. She invested, and the French guy I mentioned earlier, he ran it together with her. And Respiro started off as an open source tech project together with Veolia, which is the old General des Eaux from Paris. They thought they were going to win the biggest car sharing tender in Europe, which was for 2,000 electric cars a few years ago. And so they were developing technology ready for that, but then they didn't win. Bolloré, the richest man in France, won, and now there's 3,000 cars in Paris in an electric car sharing project. And we were doing alpha testing and beta testing, and Ines and Philip knocked themselves out for about 1.5 years with that, and then we decided to switch. So the platform worked, and the customers didn't realize, but we had a lot of patching to do. It was difficult.
So you did the business planning?
Yeah.
And how did you decide? Because very often as a startup and entrepreneur, you need to find a co-founder. Someone has the business idea or someone has the technology knowledge. So how did this, what roles did Ines take and Philip, you're the guy?
Respiro was 3 people at the start. So, entrepreneurs do everything. So the roles were...
Take notes.
I was even in a biotech that was on about 4 billion revenue. And the CEO, who had more or less founded it, he believed there was no place in his organization for organization charts. There was, 5,000 employees. And he said, why do you need a chart to decide what's important to do? Get on with what's important. Don't tell me what your title is. And the longer somebody's title, the less valuable they probably are. So I think it's, we still kind of mix roles and responsibilities. Respiro, we never want to be 1,000 employees. It's high quality, low cost, no people. So, we have about 1,000 customers to 1 employee. So we try to keep it relatively lean and mean, and it's actually much easier that way. When I was in multinationals, what I hated most was meetings, to sit there and take hours to not decide anything. This was why I became it. I couldn't sit there.
So what made you quit and come in full time and roll up the sleeves and
and that actually gave a huge amount of extra work, and we needed to do all kinds of modeling, forecast for. Costs is easy, but the revenue was not quite, because we had this idea about the latent demand, because our cars were moving a lot. So if you then triple fleet, will your usage go up or will it stay the same per user? And we were finding that the demand modeling needed a lot of work, as did the finance structure, and the team needed extra help. So that's why a year and a half ago only, so 4 years after sort of being cash cow where they were the stars, I jumped in full time.
Just going back, what besides apparently Ines had a lot of money, was there any other reason why you chose her to run the business? Her experience in running a startup, or?
We were a group that met, so we were all the founders were in the same executive MBA group in Instituto de Empresa, and it kind of grew from that with friends and contacts that were in the same space, so we knew each other. I think it's also important if you're in a small circle, it's important to know each other, trust each other, believe in each other's abilities. So that was how we started.
Okay. Yeah. Now, for any entrepreneur, any startup, it's the elephant in the room is funding. We always need to look for funding. What was your funding path, and what hurdles have you and obstacles have you met in that path?
So in 2008, when we were in the venture lab, I'm not sure how many VCs there were in Spain, but it's definitely on one. You could count them on one hand. There was, 3. So we went to see 3 of them. 3. One of them said, "We only invest in companies with patents. Do you have a patent?" And the next one said, "We only invest in companies with patents. Do you have a patent?" We could see a trend emerging. Yeah. And that was.
So you didn't ask the third.
So we kind of just started on our own. We said, "All right, let's do 10 cars," and that was fine for the beginning. It was friends and family. It was the 3 Fs and
phones.
Yeah, friends, family. So the one about.
No.
They say there's 3 types of people: those that can count and those that can't.
Okay.
So. We started like that, and we only recently got an institutional investor and a family office 2 or 3 years ago. So, but in the beginning, it was relatively modest amounts. And then at a certain stage, we qualified for bank loans, which was wonderful.
So you haven't gone down this classic VC route. You said institutional.
We have one VC in, but it's also a relatively low amount. And that's it. We didn't do. I'm not sure if we ever thought that this was a business model that you could just throw a huge amount of money and then see this explosive Facebook kind of growth. We believe in parallel lines between demand and supply. So as your customer base grows, you can add, according to the ratios, some more cars. Some companies have tried to do it that way with the VCs. There was the VC that made a lot of money out of Skype after they had sold Skype. They put a huge amount of money into a German car sharing project where they launched 850 cars in a year. And then actually they called me last year and told me that they were losing 200,000 euros a month. And if I could have a look at their business plan and their numbers. And if I could help, and I said yes. And then they said, do you have €1 million to invest? And I said no. And Zipcar is the first ever stock exchange listed car sharing company. It was bought by Avis for 500 million. There was 67 million invested by VCs, principally Greystoke in Boston. So that growth model did work in America. They have 1 million users and it's a great company. It's now owned by Avis. But they have grown a much more slower, incremental. There's also one in Switzerland.
Do you see a benefit in working with a family office, which could be a little bit more long-term in their money investment strategy, and institutionals who maybe will not even bother you until the annual report?
Well, in our case, the family office, they don't bother us. They're on holiday. So
a great job.
So that's okay. I think it's all about individuals. I don't know if investors are not your friends. Basically, they're there to get a return.
Good
right?
soundbite.
So that's my opinion about investors: is that they just want to know how well it's growing, how are the costs developing, are we hitting a budget, and it's quite predictable.
Yeah. And when is lunch?
And when can we be? When is the exit?
Yeah. Okay. Where is car sharing going? You're starting with Spain, and then Europe maybe, and then the world.
Well, car sharing is growing, so depending on which consultant you talk to.
Going.
1/3 or 40% of the population should or will use car sharing in the future. The question is how fast will that penetration level be reached? Because if you drive less than 1,000 kilometers a month, then you can save thousands of euros a year by using a pay-as-you-go service rather than owning a car. If you drive more than 1,000, it's a good investment to own a car, but there's a huge amount of people that are spending massive amount of money for something they don't really use. But this is behavior change, so it's not going to be a revolution overnight. We have done market research where for every customer, we know that there's 6 people out there in Madrid thinking about changing. And we get 20, 30 new customers a day. We are growing nicely, but it's not thousands. But we're not on the Facebook. But I think these are all snowball.
Is there demographics on your customer? Is it the young millennials that we will stereotype as a car sharing person, or is it?
So in the beginning, it was very stereotypical. We had so many engineers and programmers; it was incredible. And our customers would call us up and say, "Can you explain the wiring to us?" and things like that. Those are engineers. The car sharing is the first example of a connected car. Right, so the idea that you can send an SMS or an email, internet-based message to a telecommunications box inside the car that then opens the door. I mean, people were impressed and still can be very surprised that cars can be opened like that. So it was a little bit of a a tech thing or a tech environment that adopted Respiro. We had a lot of very interesting people as customers. People that had done important, innovative things in Spain, and didn't join Respiro because of the savings element. It was because of the technology element. So there was quite a lot of people like that. But now it's the distribution is, in terms of ages, a very normal Gauss curve, and we have. It's not just the highly educated. It's moving much more mainstream.
Okay, and that is the pattern in Europe, and you think it's a global pattern?
Yeah, I think so. In other countries, you have probably a higher amount of students, but in Spain, students don't necessarily have a student job, so they don't have as much money. So
What makes a good country or a good city for a car sharing system?
So the demographic density is the first indicator. More people close to the car means that there's more people available to use it. So it's interesting that car sharing has actually originated in Northern Europe and North America. So where we're from, Scandinavia, it's much more like a forest, so it's not actually that great for car sharing. And the Mediterranean area is where the demographic density is. So I think the future growth is going to be in Southern Europe more than even Northern Europe, because there's far more people. So Madrid is probably the second or third best car sharing city in Europe after Paris and Moscow, because there's so many people. And outside the M30, the demographic density stays the same. So I never really understand why the house prices are different in different areas of Madrid, because it's more or less the same kind of build-up. So for us, it's perfect.
So are we going to see a Respiro in Moscow? You mentioned that's one of the best cities.
Well, what's happened in Moscow is amazing. The first car sharing company in Moscow was launched a year and a half ago, and now there are 5,000 cars, 4 companies, each with 1,000 cars each. It's amazing, and it's been an explosion. Moscow has very high demographic density. I think you also traveled there a lot. You were, and so it's just incredible. Russian technology adoption is a lot faster than what you might see in some of the old European countries.
100%. I have a great story from I met one of the directors of the Skolkovo Innovation Center in North, and we met here in Madrid actually, and he talked about it. But here in Europe, you take so long time to do everything. I mean, you talk and policies, and then it comes to the money, you keep talking for years. It took them 6 months for Skolkovo to raise $1 billion in funding, and they had $1 billion sitting there, and they pumped out 3,000 startups the first couple of years they existed. And much faster, let's do it.
There's a lot of talent in Russia. It's amazing.
A little bit more closer to home. In Madrid, we have recently see car2go rise quite rapidly.
Yeah.
Where do they fit into the landscape between car sharing, taxis, transportation?
So they compete directly with taxis because their average duration is 20 minutes and a distance of 3 or 4 kilometers. You cross the city from A to B, just like a taxi. So it's a self-driven taxi, if you like. And the price is close, just a bit cheaper than a taxi. And we have much longer durations of hires and distances, reflecting the use of a private car. So the overlap is not that big. I mean, typically you'll see Respiro cars more often on the main arteries driving out to the M30 and then in the periphery of Madrid. And car2go is micro-mobility inside the M30. You don't see them outside. So at the moment, we're not really competing, but the question is in 5-7 years when electric cars have a broader autonomy, well, I think both of us will have electric cars, right? But at the moment, we don't because of the prices. We're not a car manufacturer, it's just a startup that has become an SME, so we didn't quite manage to build electric cars.
But we have seen in Europe a lot of the platforms, just like yourself, has actually tied up with car manufacturers, which is a natural projection, I guess. You know, you need their assets and they need you. So are we going to see all Mercedes soon, or?
Well, today there's the launch of the Paris Motor Show, and today Peugeot Citroën launched a worldwide car sharing platform, and Renault also launched one. So General Motors are now working with Zipcar. So it's kind of interesting. In 2010, when we started, you would go to car companies and they didn't even know what car sharing was. And then a year, 2 years ago, I started going to these conferences. Respiro invited the speakers to different places in Europe. And then car companies started, strategy department, car company representatives started turning up. And it's very interesting. This year, I've been in several meetings where they have suddenly become the biggest spokespeople for the benefits of car sharing. Whereas a few years ago, they were worried about, you know, the market erosion, which comes from an average car sharing car takes 8 to 20 cars off the street, because the average private car is used less than 1 hour per day. So there's a lot of space for more rational usage of a highly costly asset. So that argument was dangerous some years ago to car manufacturers, but today they are the ones that are talking about it, and I think they see that the car as a product can be complemented as the car as a service. So they have the infrastructure to plug in an extra revenue stream to their setup, and so they probably will make a lot more money than the independent car sharing operators. So I think car sharing is going to be very mainstream, and we're going to see a lot of new players entering in the next year or two. It's going to move.
I have a last question, and then after this we can open up and you can have questions to Ian. So, is there any government policies or insurances, and are there things in car sharing economy in Spain that should be changed for the community and for the country and for everyone to take more use of this?
Well, we would love to see dedicated parking spaces. So just like there are dedicated parking spaces for taxis, there should be car sharing spaces. So in your neighborhood, you will notice much more a car sharing car that's parked on your street than in a subterranean garage.
So government-sponsored marketing.
Yes, that would be nice. Yeah, that would. And well, we're also in favor of a carbon tax. Why not? There should be carbon tax.
Carbon tax.
So transport is the main source of CO2 emissions. CO2 emissions are the main source of climate change, biggest problem on the planet. So if we have to do something about it, carbon tax. But I'm not sure that will happen. I think we're going to get car sharing spaces before.
Okay, great. Let's take some questions to Ian before we finish off with some of his favorite books and stuff. You have questions? Yes, Simon.
Ian, let me preface my question by saying I'm a Respiro user, but I mean, a number of years ago my car was stolen in Madrid, so I didn't buy another one. I was living in the centre, so I've got a motor scooter, I didn't really need one. So I took it with Blue Move, because they had a parking garage right next to where I live, basically, and I used them for a while. I then moved a while ago to down by the river, and lo and behold, right next to me there's a garage with a Respiro car there. So I changed to Respiro, in fact I've got both cars now. But as a builder, my question is, what's your sort of competitive advantage that's going to be sustainable, that will allow you to sort of compete into the future, and when did that come about?
So, well, the main competitive advantage that Respiro has is the one that you just mentioned, is that we have the biggest fleet and we have more garages. So on average, if you take a random location, Respiro will be closer to you because we have more presence. So we have always tried to maintain the leadership that we have, and so we have grown most in absolute terms and relative terms compared to the others, and we managed to do it with less cash burn. So to some degree we've managed to be more efficient in the rollout, but you're right insofar as the technology needs to open doors and be an efficient reservation system that never fails, but it's not a differentiating factor, it's a fundamental. So we try to differentiate on a friendly spirit and tone and excellent customer service. So I hope you've noticed that. Well, we are Europe's first carbon neutral car sharing service, so we via reforestation schemes.
So you are doing your bit for the...
We do something that most... we want it to be transformative and disruptive on all levels. So obviously car sharing is transformative technologically, economically, because it creates macroeconomic benefits, socially, because it's democratization of the car, but also environmentally, we plant trees to offset our emissions. So we do a little bit extra, and well, who knows, maybe more mobility companies will do the same, and then actually we solve the problem, which is climate change. So we go the extra mile there because we don't want to have a toxic company. We want
Great.
a balanced one.
It's a great service, by the way, thank you.
I'm glad you like it, thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah. Mr. Babis.
All the cars belong to your company, or also a private guy can share it with you and with your
Would
clients?
you like to give us your car? We have a guy that just bought a Tesla who's going to give us his car, actually, so look out for that one on our website. We own about a third of the cars, and we have 2/3 in renting. So that's
You have about how many
a
cars?
long-term rental, about 200.
200 cars.
Yeah. So and the reason for that is the evolution of our business model and our capacity to pay for cars in different ways. As we grew, it's easier today than when you start and only have 10 cars and nobody knows what car sharing is. So, and also sometimes there are offers in the market which you say, okay, we're going to buy these cars because they're available at a great price.
Yeah, okay. It's also a big difference if it belongs to you or you have a long-term rental and you...
No, it's not peer-to-peer. We don't do peer-to-peer. That business model sounds wonderful, but what we found out is that on average, peer-to-peer car sharing cars are hired once a year, which is not enough, right? So we're not in that space yet. I think there's a lot of these businesses. There's a lot of these ideas that will evolve and work at a certain stage, but you have to be very brave with peer-to-peer to actually do it now. I think this may take 5 or 10 years before the market is ready. You have to. You can't change the world in every area, so we stick to what we should.
Okay, any other questions? Yes?
Yeah, well, there are 3 questions in one. How many employees are you now, and what are your scaling? What's your scaling plan? What are the main struggles you're going through while growing?
So we have 15 employees, and we don't need to grow our FTE headcounts very much because it's a telematic system. Most of the customers we never see. They are just using the app to make all the reservations. As the fleet grows, you need more people to maintain and clean the cars, but it's not a huge amount. The demographic density of Madrid is so high that dollar for dollar, we see it as a better investment to grow Madrid than to start opening all kinds of other cities at the same time, which can become a distraction from a team that is always running quite hard. So our geographical expansion is via partners, and we have a franchise. Just like many people don't know, Uber is actually a franchise in many countries. So we have some opportunities there, but we haven't announced them yet. But we've got something that we can extrapolate.
We need to have it. You heard it first on Startup Grind.
Yeah.
So if you're doing something like that, we need to know now. Okay. Constanza?
Yeah, what's your differentiator compared to Car2Go? Why should I take a Respiro and not a Car2Go?
Car2Go is micro-mobility, so it's an alternative to a taxi. And few people will take a taxi more than 10 or 15 kilometers, 20 kilometers. Then it starts getting enormously expensive, right? Car2Go is 12 euros an hour. So it's for short trips only, and Respiro is much longer trips.
At 4 euros an hour.
Yeah, 5. But, so our trips are much longer, 15 times longer on average, right? So they do 3 kilometers and we'll do 50, 60. So it's a different usage pattern. We're not really competing.
Okay. Pender?
So as a current IE student and somebody that's an aspiring entrepreneur, I know that you learn a lot from your mistakes. So what is a mistake that you guys have made at Respiro that you maybe regret, or something that you've done that you could learn from and say, wow, I wish we didn't do this?
I think you have to be very careful with your selection of team members or any contributor to something critical. You can easily make the mistake that your own implication, motivation, drive is shared by everyone else. And what you see is that people are very different. And so what we saw is that, when it was, when the television and the radio turned up and they wanted to interview us, then everybody wants to do it. But then when it gets a bit difficult, then there's a separation of those that still want to do it and those that don't. So entrepreneurship is extremely hard. You are working non-stop, and I think we should probably have been more critical in some of the hires we made early on. We always had nice people, very nice people, but they're not necessarily always massively driven, highly productive people, right? And entrepreneurs need that, because otherwise you don't fly. You can't fly. You need to take off. So we had some trouble with that, and we talked about that a little bit. The entrepreneurship mentality it's not the 9-to-5 mentality. You just can't get everything done.
Actually, in Book and Bloom, we took a decision. We only hire PhDs. Poor, hungry, and driven.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, that's perfect.
So let's finish off. Last 2 points. What books and blogs and things should these guys follow and listen and read to get more on entrepreneurship?
Well, I like Kawasaki. I think he's great.
I like to drive a Honda, but Guy Kawasaki.
Guy Kawasaki. I like him. He's
a great guy.
He's concise. He's funny, and he gets to the point. I don't know. I'm not sure if entrepreneurs need necessarily to study so many blogs. I think there's the best answer is hard work and find the solutions yourself. A lot of entrepreneurs are very educated, right? And I almost say that I'm guilty of that myself, right? When I started business, I said I do business and books because I read a lot of books. But there's no substitute just getting on with work and get it done. There's no answers in the books to your business problems or opportunities. You have to find them within yourself. So I think most answers are you can come up with them, and I'm not sure I found any blogs that helped me so much. But Kawasaki's funny. He's cool.
Let's give a big hand to Ian and say thank you for his time.